when I introduce myself, I'll mention that I have a PE or that I came from the industry, and a lot of customers will immediately say something like, "Oh, okay, so I don't have to explain things to you. Like, you just get it." And that's kind of what I'd like the relationship to be.
Hey, it does help it go a lot smoother.
Yes, though I will say the software can be like, there's so many things you can do with it. We do a lot of like one-on-ones with end users, and I've yet to have the same person ask me the same question twice. Like, it's been over a year and a half, and I get stumped all the time with questions because like it's just so complicated, and people just like push and pull the software so much, which is super exciting. But sometimes you just gotta say, I don't know, I'll get back to you.
Yeah. And that alone is great advice in any career.
Yes, it's okay to say you don't know.
Yeah. So what is it like in general working for Bluebeam? And I also knew you're a fully remote employee, so that gives a little different flair to how you're working.
Yeah, so it is fully remote. That was something that was really important to me kind of in the stage of life when I kind of joined the company. I've got a 2-year-old, so kind of do the math, he was pretty young. And it just gave me the opportunity to be the employee and the mom that I wanted to be. The idea of like the commute was really challenging for me, but also living in Las Vegas, there was less opportunities than in a larger city. And I had moved my family here for the Las Vegas opportunity. Didn't really want to get into this routine where we just move around that much. It's just kind of challenging. So yeah, working remote for me has been great. Like I said, I'm an incredibly creative person. And for me, sometimes when I really get stuck on a problem, there's nothing quite like going outside and taking a walk. I know that sounds incredibly cliche. But for the month of April, Bluebeam actually did a wellness challenge. So it's not mandatory, you just sign up for it. You kind of get placed into teams and have certain miles that we actually all compete to get the most miles within the month. So I didn't want to let my team down and made sure to go on at least one walk a day. I will say, and I've kept it up, it's like mid-May right now. So since the beginning of April, it's getting kind of hot here in Vegas. So I don't know how much longer this is going to go. But I think I've been the most creative that I've been in the last like 6-7 weeks, just going on daily walks. So just like more interesting LinkedIn content. Hopefully my LinkedIn followers agree with that. I don't know. I felt better about it. And also just like more creative at work with like being able to tackle some different things as they've come up. So that's been my experience working from home, but I know that different people feel differently about it. But for me, it's really given me a lot more balance in my life.
Yeah, but I think probably 2 important parts you touched on was your family, and you being having a young child creates different stresses on the family, and getting to and from, having to be places, they get sick, and then COVID and daycare, and God forbid a kid sneezes and the daycare facility is getting closed. Like, the young parents that I work with are always dealing with these struggles, pushing and pulling them, that it's like sometimes if they can just be at home, regardless if their kids are in daycare or not, they can have the heads down time to focus whenever something has to pull them a different way and shift. But the other component's location. Like, you don't want to pick up and move your family every couple years if you're going to change jobs every few years. And I think the opportunities of fully remote employment gives people opportunities to work for companies that aren't in their local region, but at the same time gives companies opportunities to get great professionals like yourself that aren't located right in their city or have their unique experience to help build them up. So I know there's a big push to bring everybody back to the office, but I think remote employees also have their own benefit for the employee and the employer.
Yeah.
Everybody should keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more than anything about there being a conversation around what's best. And I know that obviously there's pros and cons to both pieces, and I get that, and I'm fully kind of on board. And I think for different people, it makes very much sense to be in office. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can't. Bluebeam's doing it right with how they're treating their remote employees, and I really appreciate that. I'm on a fantastic team. My managers all have kids. My team, a lot of them have kids. They kind of understand what that looks like. And I think that that's really important. In previous roles, I wasn't really surrounded by a lot of parents. At the time, I wasn't a parent or I was pregnant. And I think I kind of felt more of that when I was pregnant was, oh, like people around me don't really understand what's happening. And I think that was really, really challenging. So when I was interviewing at companies for, the role that I have now at different companies, that was really important for me to ask, like, do people have kids? Like, I have a kid. Am I going to feel like the weird one? Because it's like, this is the stage of life that I'm in. And I think having those conversations was really important. I'm sure some employers may be passed on me because I mentioned it. I don't know, maybe. I'll never find out. But yeah, I think it's certainly an interesting conversation that's going to continue. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how the world moves forward with the whole remote work in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And I wouldn't discount the question either. Like, I know you're not supposed to bring up family things in an interview, but hey, if it crosses me off a list and I don't say yes to your offer and then instantly regret it, it saves you time, it saves me time. So I'd rather be open and honest in the questions, and definitely asking about the people that are currently there is important. And especially if you're remote, like it takes a little bit longer to build those relationships virtually because you have to make calls, or if the team has regular meetings, like they have to have their process in place to make it engaging for remote.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go the in-office route where it just happens and you assume things will happen, then it won't.
Yeah.
So definitely a mindset shift with the team you're on. So
yeah, and I think it's challenging when you're interviewing because you typically just really want a job pretty badly. So I think that's why it's kind of important to not skip that more introspective stage. For me, like I really identified early on that remote work was the only thing I was really willing to do at that time. I wasn't interested in going into the office, even if it was a great opportunity. I just wasn't ready for that. And so making that, one of my top requirements really shifted a lot of conversations because the salary didn't really become that important to me because like I knew what my number one most important item was on my list. So,
yeah. And you're touching on a lot of the resources you've created. So I know you've got the pivot guide. I know you also have a career pivot checklist. And then I believe you also review resumes.
Yes.
As well.
I also do resume reviews, and I do some coaching, which one-on-one coaching, it's a little tougher to do those just because my time is really limited. But I do that with customers that kind of feel like they just really need that type of attention, which I think is totally fair and justified. Certainly trying to think of like other ways to kind of help support the community, especially through this like what I think is a really vulnerable stage where you're really wanting to do something different. You've probably got all these pressures to figure out what to do, but you just don't know how to get there. You just know you want to get there. And for me, the most important thing is kind of creating a one-stop shop where you can kind of work through the whole process without saying like, oh, like you have to buy this guide and then that guide and then that guide. Because the checklist is totally free. And the guide is kind of the paid option, which kind of walks you through the whole process. But yeah, it's just the beginning for me. So I'm excited to see kind of what that all leads to and what happens with it. But yeah, launched the guide a couple weeks ago, and people have been giving some great feedback, which makes me feel awesome. It's exactly what I did to pivot. did the big pivot from general contractor to tech, but also did that pivot from an engineering role to a construction role. So two pivots, two different experiences to kind of weave into that guide.
Yeah. So what were your top must-haves?
For my current role, my number one probably was the remote aspect. There's certainly a salary piece that was important to me. I feel like anyone who says otherwise is maybe lying. And then after that, it really became, I wanted to make sure that I was a right fit with the team I was working with, particularly with my manager. I knew that I knew this was going to be a new role for me, that I would have a lot to learn. And I wanted to make sure that I felt supported by not only my manager, but also the team, so I could grow into the role, which I'd never considered the fit with the company quite in that way. It was more like, oh, my values kind of align, but never like, can I really work with this manager or with this team? And so I really used the interviews as a way for me to be interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing me, just so I could really get as much of a sense for the team as I could. And yeah, they didn't lie. So it's been over a year and a half, and I still love working with all of them. So that was probably, those are the three things, but I would say maybe not exactly in that order. They were all kind of equal importance.
Yeah. Like you always have your number one based on wherever you are in life. And salary is always up there, but I think a lot of employers assume that that's the only thing people care about. And it's really not. I know when I went over to work with a contractor for a little bit and pivoted out, and I ended up hating it, but not so much for the contractor side, but more the people and the atmosphere that was there I didn't like, and I didn't interview enough to figure out that culture piece. And pivoting back into architecture, I knew I was going to take a pay cut. And so it was like, all right, well, as long as it's a positive from the architecture firm I left before going to the contractor side, then I'm good. But when I left architecture originally, I was so burnt out. And so work-life balance and paid time off were actually more important to me. And that was pre-COVID. So now it's like, well, I'm sorry, flex work is one of the top things on my list if I ever want to change jobs again, and potentially full remote. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's important to know that everybody's preferences are different, and it's okay if your preferences change as well.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of really the core of my mission, is giving somebody the permission to unlock themselves to other opportunities. Because for me, when I was in my undergrad, I didn't really feel like I had options. It was either go into structural engineering, which is where the good students go, or go work for a general contractor where the rebels go. And because there was more money, so the rebels went there. That this was kind of what I was told for 4 years. And so I went to work for an engineering company as a project manager, but still that kind of environment. Didn't like it. So I went to go work for a construction company. And then after a couple of years, I didn't like that for different reasons. So then you kind of end up at this juncture where you're like, well, there are only two things that I could do with my degree. I've done them both and I don't like them, but I'm still kind of need income. So what do I do? And I think it was giving myself permission to say, like, yes, you do have a master's in civil engineering, and yes, you are a PE, and neither of those things are a requirement for your role as a CSM at a tech company, but you're going to love it. So give yourself the permission to make that pivot.
Check out the full discussion from this bite of advice here. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on more mentorDINO content.